Okay, so this is a continuation of the chapter 3 lecture. So as I mentioned before, there are two ways to describe epithelial tissue. The first way is how many layers you see, and the second way is what the shape of the cell is going to be. So there will be three kinds of shapes. We have squamous, cuboidal, and columnar. So we have those three. So the third one will be columnar. So squamous means flat. So let me write that for you. So squamous epithelium means flat. So they're going to have flat shape. So you have a flat cell, that's a squamous epithelial cell, and then cuboidal means the width and the length are the same. So it means the width and the length are the same, so they're equal. And what I mean by that is, so let's try to maybe draw a cell. So if a cell has same width, so width and length, then their cuboidal epithelium. So the shape, so it looks like a cube, but it doesn't have to be a cube or a square. But in reality, most cuboidal cells are going to be round. So if you look here, they're kind of roundish. They're not perfect square. So let me see. So they're going to, so it can be round and it can have still the same width and length. So I'm just trying to draw it in the round shape. So it's still going to have the same width and length, and that's the cuboidal shape. And then you have a columnar epithelium. So what does that look like? So it's a nice tall cell that's going to have the length longer than the width. So this is longer, let's say L for length, than the width here. So if I type this, the length is longer than the width. So that's what this is going to look like. It's going to be a nice tall cell attached to the membrane. The length over here is really long, but the width is going to be short. So that's the difference between three squamous. Between three cells, squamous is flat, cuboidal is almost like a square, and columnar is going to be longer. The length is going to be longer than the width. So you can see up here exactly what I mean is you have the cuboidal cells. They are kind of looking squarish, but they're round. These are flat cells. And then the columnar are really long, and then width is smaller. So those are columnar cells, and these are cuboidal cells. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's combine what we learned. We have the layers and the shapes. Let's combine them in this grid. So you have the shape squamous, and then there's one layer. So that's called simple squamous epithelium. And you do need to say all three if you want to get full credit on the quizzes and the exams. You need to say epithelium at the end. The reason why you have to say epithelium is because I've noticed a lot of students don't understand these terminologies, and they don't understand this terminology only applies to epithelial tissue. For example, maybe sometimes a student will write, look at it, the slide under the microscope, and they say simple cuboidal muscle tissue or simple columnar nerve tissue. So you need to understand that this terminology do not apply to those tissues, only applies to epithelial tissue. So make sure you write epithelium at the end. And then if it's going to have multiple layers, it's going to be stratified squamous epithelium. And then we also have a simple cuboidal epithelium if it's one layer in a cuboidal shape. Then if it's multiple layers, then that's stratified cuboidal epithelium. So we can kind of mix and match. And then we have columnar, and then that's where we also have pseudostratified. So this is going to be a little bit outside the box because this is one layer. It's not called simple, but it's called pseudostratified because it looks like multiple layers. So it's going to be pseudostratified columnar epithelium because the cell shape is long again. And I want you to also incorporate the stuff that's here, that's cilia, micro, on top of this tissue. So when you see that, I want you to call it simple ciliated columnar epithelium. So that's when you see the cilia there. So where you would find this, it would be in the fallopian tubes. Fallopian tubes have cilia, and that's what moves the egg to the fallopian tube. And then on the respiratory system, you have the pseudostratified ciliated. This also has a cilia. And this is going to move the mucus up in your trachea and your bronchi. And there's one more that I'm not going to talk about. That one is called transitional. The reason is because it changes the shape. So this is called transitional epithelium. And the reason we're not talking about it is because it looks different depending on if it's, full or not. Means maybe, when it gets hydrated, there's water in it, changes shape. And it's found in your urinary bladder. Urinary bladder, when it's empty, you look at it under the microscope, it's going to look one way. When your urinary bladder is full, the tissue gets stretched out, and you're going to look at it under the microscope, it's going to look different. So that's why it's called transitional. It can transit from one image to the other. And because it kind of changes depending on how you're looking at it, I'm not going to include that in this course. Okay, so other stuff that you find in the epithelial tissue will be the glands. And as I mentioned before, the skin is going to secrete things. And if you have gotten a gland that secretes things to the outside world, that's going to be called exocrine gland. And exo means outside. And then crine means gland. So exocrine, so since crine already means gland, when we say exocrine glands, it's actually kind of redundant. You're repeating yourself because crine already means gland. So you're just kind of saying exocrine. So you're kind of saying gland twice. So exocrine is enough for us to understand what's going on. So some examples would be, sweat. And then what a lot of people, and then digestive secretions. What a lot of people don't realize is that your digestive secretions are also secreted by exocrine glands, and that's because they're secreted into your stomach, in your intestines, and technically inside your stomach, and intestine is outside because there's bacteria in there, there's air in there, there's space in the stomach. Intestine is in communication with the outside world. If you took a, if you took a rock, maybe tied through a long string and swallowed it, it will come out through the other side and you'll still be holding the string. And that's because inside of your digestive system is considered to be outside. So so if that's outside, what's inside then? So inside would be the stuff that is not in communication with the outside world. So that's going to be your blood inside your cavities in your body, the stuff that doesn't have air, that stuff that doesn't have any bacteria, sterile. So that's considered to be inside. So what goes in there? So that's another kind of chemical. Let me see. So exocrine glands, they secrete water, mucus, and digestive secretion. So in the inside world, you have the hormones. So something like maybe insulin, glucagon, testosterone, and so forth. So these are secreted by endocrine glands, and these glands are inside. So endocrine, they're going to secrete the hormones, but these will go in your bloodstream, not in your intestines. So these go into your interstitial fluid, and that's the fluid between the tissues. So these are the two kinds of glands. These are going to be found in your epithelial tissue, and they can do both of these kinds of things. Okay. So let's remind us where we are. So we said that in the very beginning, we have 4 types of tissue. So we have, let's see, go back to the slide in the very beginning. So we had epithelial, connective, and muscular tissue and neural tissue. So we just finished covering, we spent a lot of time talking about epithelial tissue. So what's coming next is the connective tissue. So next we're going to talk about connective tissue. So connective tissue, I'm actually going to make a different video on the connective tissue here because I want to include all of connective tissue in a single video, and don't want it getting too long. So I'm going to stop this here and I'll record a new video for the next portion.